Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, so let's jump right in. We're going deep on Mexican-American immigration today.
Sounds good.
We've got sources here going all the way back to the California Gold Rush,
Yep.
up through, the late 20th century. It's a big topic, right?
It's huge.
Economics, politics, real people's stories.
That's all connected.
Exactly. And the thing is, this isn't just history.
Oh, absolutely not.
Understanding this stuff helps make sense of what's going on today with immigration, all of it.
100%. I mean, you see the same patterns over and over.
That's what I was thinking as I was looking through these sources, like anti-immigrant feelings, that stuff's not new at all.
No.
The gold rush in the 1850s already had laws targeting Mexican minors. What was that about?
Well, anytime you have a boom, people come looking for opportunity, right?
Right.
But it creates fear, too. People who are already there, they see newcomers as competition.
But it wasn't just the economics, was it? There was a racial element there, too.
Oh, definitely. Back then, the idea of America as a melting pot, it wasn't so popular. Many people saw non-white immigrants as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Less likely to assimilate.
And then it happened again during the Great Depression, right?
Unemployment was through the roof.
So jobs for white Americans first?
Exactly. And they used deportation to remove Mexican Americans.
Even if they were citizens.
Even citizens, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a reminder how fear and bad economics can lead to discrimination.
Heavy stuff. But things changed with the 1965 Hart-Celler Act. No more national origins quotas. They prioritized family reunification. What happened then?
Big shift. It changed everything, especially for Mexican immigration. Family reunification meant if you had relatives here already, it was way easier to come over.
A chain reaction.
Right. By the 80s, Mexicans were the largest immigrant group.
And a lot of undocumented immigrants were Mexican, too.
Exactly. And that's where the push and pull factors come in. You know what I mean?
Like what forces people to leave their home country and what draws them to a new one.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you've got the push factors, poverty, no jobs, violence, all that, pushing people out.
And then the pull of a better life. Hearing stories from family who'd already made it to the U.S.
Right. Like in one of our sources, a woman from Jalisco, her father was a bracero.
Ah, the Bracero Program.
Yeah. And even decades later, his experience during World War II influenced her decision to migrate.
Wow. It was supposed to be a temporary program, but it created a lasting image of opportunity in America.
Definitely. But that image didn't always match reality.
Right. A lot of Mexican immigrants faced hardship, discrimination, low wages. It's like a broken promise.
Yeah, that contrast between expectation and reality, it's something you see a lot in this history.
It's sad. Another story that stuck with me, Rosa Maria Urbina,
Oh, yeah.
crossing the Rio Grande multiple times, even paying river carriers to get her through the currents.
She was desperate to support her family. It shows the risks people were willing to take.
And the informal economies that sprung up around migration.
Exactly. People smuggling migrants, finding them places to stay, connecting them with jobs, all under the radar.
It speaks to how desperate people were.
Absolutely. They were facing such tough choices, leaving everything behind.
It makes you think. Then there's the 1986 Immigration Reform Control Act.
IRCA. Big one.
Seems like they were trying to figure out what to do with the growing undocumented population.
Yeah, lots of them Mexican. IRCA had two main goals: amnesty for some undocumented immigrants
Okay.
and employer sanctions to try to stop hiring undocumented workers.
How'd that go?
Controversial, for sure.
Yeah.
Some folks argued the amnesty just encouraged more undocumented immigration.
Thinking there'd be another amnesty down the line.
Right. And then Latino advocacy groups, they didn't think IRCA went far enough.
Like a Band-Aid on a bigger problem?
Yeah, they saw it as a missed opportunity for real change.
One thing I noticed, so much of the debate around Mexican immigration was about economics.
Jobs, yeah.
This idea that they were stealing jobs from American citizens.
And that fear, often mixed with racism. You had people like Texas Congressman John Box openly saying racist things about Mexicans.
Painting them as a threat? How common was that?
Well, Box was loud about it, but he wasn't alone. This nativism, fear of foreigners, was growing. Combined with that economic anxiety, it shaped the political scene big time.
A toxic mix. But let's zoom out for a second. How do historians make sense of all this?
Well, there are a few different schools of thought.
Okay, so different ways of looking at the same history.
Right, each with its own focus.
That's the first one.
Economic determinism. Basically, it says that global economic inequalities drive migration.
So it's not just about individual choices, but bigger forces at play.
Exactly. David Card, for example, he's done a lot of research showing that the U.S. needs cheap labor.
And that fuels Mexican immigration no matter what laws are in place.
Right. Supply and demand on a global scale.
Makes sense. What about critical race theory? How does that fit in?
Well, critical race theory looks at how racism is baked into our systems. It disadvantages certain groups no matter what.
So in this case, it's saying the immigration debate is about race, not just economics.
Right. Eduardo Bonilla-Silva, he argues that policies, how we treat immigrants, it's all influenced by racial biases. Like, it's not just individual prejudice.
More like a system of power that benefits some and hurts others.
Exactly. It's about understanding those historical and systemic factors that create inequality.
Powerful stuff. What are some other perspectives?
Well, there's social history. It focuses on the lived experiences of immigrants.
So less about the big picture and more about what it was like to be a Mexican immigrant during these times.
Exactly. Historians like Vicky Ruiz, they document those individual stories, the resilience, the resourcefulness, the struggles, like Rosa Maria Urbina.
Her story, it reminds us we're talking about real people with hopes and dreams, not just numbers.
Definitely. Those personal stories help us understand what people went through, challenge stereotypes.
So each lens gives us a piece of the puzzle. What's the last one?
Political history. It looks at how government policies and political debates have shaped everything.
Okay, so like why certain laws were passed, how they impacted people, intended and unintended consequences.
Exactly. Moyengai, she's done a lot of work on that, looking at how America sees itself as a nation of immigrants, but also has a history of excluding people.
Sounds like a complicated relationship with immigration, but before we go any further, we need to talk about the human cost. We mentioned the risks of crossing the border, but what about what happens once they're here?
Yeah, exploitation's a big problem. A lot of Mexican immigrants, especially those undocumented, end up in dangerous jobs with low pay and no protection.
They're vulnerable.
Exactly. Employers take advantage, knowing they don't have many options.
And then there's the fear of deportation. Rosa Maria Urbina talked about that, how every deportation felt like a punch in the gut.
It's constant anxiety. It affects their lives, their families, even if they manage to stay.
So even with attempts at reform like IRCA, the bigger issues of inequality and racism, they're still there.
Yeah, unfortunately. It's something we need to keep in mind as we go deeper into this history. We can't just look at policies and numbers. We have to see the human faces, the forces at play.
Absolutely.
It's a complex story.
Oh, sure.
You know, one thing that's really striking as we go through all this is just how resilient Mexican immigrants are.
It's true.
They face so many obstacles.
And
Yet they've made incredible contributions to American society.
it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Their impact is everywhere. Agriculture, industry, our culture, food, everything.
Yeah.
It's like this paradox. They've enriched the country, but at the same time, they've faced so much pushback.
It's a real tension in American history. We've relied on Mexican labor for so long.
Yep.
But the response has often been hostility, exclusion.
A constant back and forth,
Yeah.
welcoming, rejecting. No wonder it's been so unstable, so uncertain for everyone.
And it's led to all these debates, all these policy changes.
Each one trying to fix the problems created by the last one. So how do we even begin to untangle all of this? Where do we start?
Well, we've talked about the economic factors.
Yeah.
But have you thought about how globalization plays into all of this?
That's a good point. As the world's become more connected, companies can move jobs to wherever labor is cheaper, right?
Exactly. And that puts a lot of pressure on American workers, especially in manufacturing.
So Mexican immigrants are kind of caught in the middle of all this.
They become the scapegoat.
Blamed for problems that are way more complicated.
Exactly. We can't talk about immigration without understanding the bigger economic picture.
Okay, so we've got economics, but what about the political side of things? How have those debates shaped all this?
Well, immigration's a hot-button issue, right? Politicians use it to get votes.
To divide people.
Exactly. So we end up with policies that are more about politics than solutions.
And real people get caught in the crossfire.
Like with IRCA in '86.
Yeah.
It granted amnesty to millions, but it also made border enforcement tougher, more dangerous crossings, more militarization.
So good intentions, but with unintended consequences.
Right, and we have to remember those consequences, they affect real lives.
It's easy to forget when you're just arguing about policy in the abstract. Is there anything else we need to consider?
Yeah, the social and cultural side of things.
Okay.
Immigration isn't just about economics and politics. It's about identity, about belonging, about how society changes.
And that's where people get really passionate, right? What it means to be American.
Yeah.
How immigration might change that.
It leads to all these anxieties about language, about assimilation, about culture being diluted.
Fear of the unknown.
Exactly. And that fear, it can be really dangerous, used to justify all sorts of harmful policies.
Yeah, with Mexican-American immigration, it's always been tied to race, too.
It's not just about immigration. It's about power, about prejudice.
About who belongs and who doesn't.
We have to approach this with empathy, with understanding, not fear and resentment.
Find solutions that are fair and that actually work.
That's the goal.
One thing that struck me reading about all these controversies was the role of family.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like family ties are a huge driver of migration.
Absolutely.
And policies that separate families, they can be devastating.
Think about that woman from Jalisco.
Yeah.
Her father's experience as a Bracero. It shaped her whole life, even decades later.
And Rosa Maria Urbina risking everything to be with her children.
It's powerful stuff.
It shows how resilient families are, how important those bonds are.
We need policies that support families, not tear them apart.
Because immigration, it's about real people, real hopes, real dreams.
It's not just about numbers and statistics.
Exactly. We can't forget that.
If we do, we end up making decisions that are not just unjust, but really harmful.
So where do we go from here with all this complexity? How do we move forward in a way that's both fair and realistic?
It's a tough question, no easy answers.
Yeah.
But I think the first step is acknowledging that there are different perspectives, different experiences.
And that they all matter.
Exactly. We have to have a more nuanced conversation, one that includes the economic, the political, the social, the cultural, everything.
Can't be one-sided.
We have to listen to each other, even when we disagree, move past all that polarized rhetoric, and find common ground.
Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. A society that's prosperous, that's welcoming.
Hopefully that's the goal. And even though it's hard, it's something worth striving for.
Well said. Well said. So we've talked about the history, the controversies, but what about the lasting effects of all this? How does the past shape the present when it comes to Mexican-American immigration?
It's everywhere. You know, the legacy of Mexican-American immigration, it's woven into the fabric of American society.
So it's not just something we study, it's something we live with.
Exactly. It's all around us, whether we realize it or not.
So where do we see this legacy most clearly?
Well, demographics are a big one.
Yeah.
All those waves of Mexican immigration, especially after the Hart-Celler Act in '65, they've changed the face of America. Latinos are the largest minority group now.
And a lot of them are of Mexican descent.
Exactly. So it's not just about numbers. It's about the changing face of America.
What kind of impact has that had?
Oh, it's huge. Everything from politics to culture to education, the economy, the whole fabric of American society has been reshaped.
Let's talk about the economy for a minute.
Sure.
We've mentioned how Mexican immigrants have been essential in so many industries, but what about the overall impact?
Well, there's a lot of debate about that. But one thing's for sure, Mexican immigrants have contributed a lot to the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
They've helped revitalize industries, created new businesses, fueled consumer spending.
It's interesting how the economic impact is always debated, but their contributions to culture, those seem more accepted.
That's a good point. There's often a disconnect there.
Like Mexican culture is so integrated into American society now, you can't really separate them.
Exactly.
Think about how popular Mexican food is, the music, the art.
You can't imagine America without it.
But then we still see so much prejudice, so much discrimination against Mexican Americans, even today.
It's true. It's in the rhetoric of some politicians. It's in the policies that get enacted.
It's like the legacy of racism, of xenophobia. It's still with us.
We see profiling, hate crimes, systemic inequalities. It's a long shadow.
Progress isn't always a straight line.
That's for sure. We can celebrate the achievements, but we have to keep fighting for a more just and equitable society.
And part of that fight is understanding this debate, recognizing the different perspectives.
Absolutely. We need to move beyond those simplistic narratives, engage with the nuances.
Listen to immigrants, understand the history, consider all the factors at play.
The economic, the political, the social, the cultural, it's all connected.
It's about seeing the human faces behind the statistics, recognizing our shared humanity.
You said it perfectly. It's about understanding that the legacy of Mexican-American immigration is a shared legacy.
One that shaped the United States in profound ways.
It's a story of struggle, of resilience, of contribution, and it's still being written. So we've gone through this incredible journey, the whole history of Mexican-American immigration, the ups and downs, the struggles, the triumphs.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
And we've explored those controversies, those flashpoints, those moments where everything seems to come to a head.
It's complex.
It is, but now I think it's time to talk about the lasting impact, the legacy of all of this.
Because it's not just about the past.
Right. It's about how those events continue to shape the world we live in today.
So where do we see this legacy? Where has it had the biggest impact?
Well, demographics are a good place to start. Think about all those waves of Mexican immigration.
Yeah.
Especially after that 1965 Hart-Celler Act. It dramatically changed the makeup of the United States.
We talked about that, how Latinos are the largest minority group now.
And a huge part of that is people of Mexican descent. So it's not just about numbers, it's about the changing face of America.
And what's been the impact of that?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it affects everything. Politics, culture, education, the economy, the whole fabric of American society has been reshaped.
Let's dive into the economy for a minute.
Sure.
We've talked about how Mexican immigrants have played these crucial roles in different industries, but what about the bigger picture, the overall economic impact?
Well, there's a lot of debate about that, but one thing is clear. Mexican immigrants have contributed a lot to the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
They've helped to revitalize industries, started new businesses, increased consumer spending. It's significant.
It's funny, right, how the economic impact is always debated, but their contributions to culture, those seem much more widely accepted.
Yeah, it's like there's this disconnect.
Like Mexican culture is so interwoven with American culture now that you can't really separate them.
Exactly. You think about it. Mexican food, the music, the art, it's all part of the American experience.
But then you have the other side of the coin, the prejudice, the discrimination that Mexican Americans still face.
Yeah, it's the dark side of this story.
How do we reconcile that, the contributions and the negativity?
It's tough, and it's something we see in the language some politicians use, the policies that get passed, the legacy of racism and xenophobia. It's still there.
It's disheartening that it's still an issue, even after all the progress.
It is, and it's a reminder that progress isn't a straight line. We have to keep pushing, keep fighting for a more just and equitable society.
So how do we do that? How do we move forward?
Well, we can't become complacent. We have to call out prejudice, discrimination whenever we see it.
And we have to be willing to have those difficult conversations about immigration.
Absolutely. We have to move beyond the simple narratives, the sound bites, and really engage with the complexity of this issue.
Listen to the experiences of immigrants, understand the history.
Look at the economics, the politics, the social factors, the cultural dynamics. It's all interconnected.
It's about seeing each other as human beings with shared hopes and dreams.
Exactly. We have to recognize that the legacy of Mexican-American immigration is a shared legacy, something that shaped us all.
It's a story of struggle, of resilience, of contribution, and it's still going on.
It is, and it's up to all of us to make sure that story continues in a positive direction, a direction of progress and inclusion.
Well said.
It's been a real privilege to explore all this with you, to delve into this complex history.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your insights.
And remember, this conversation doesn't end here, Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep challenging your assumptions.
Keep an open mind.
Exactly. Keep listening to different perspectives. Keep working towards that more just and equitable world we all want.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Mexican-American immigration.
It's been my pleasure.
We hope you've learned something new, gained a new perspective, and that you'll continue to explore this important topic. Until next time.
Keep digging.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.